Back in August, I wanted to understand what neuroscience could teach me about conspiracy theories, pathological lying, and the spread of misbelief. I came across the work of Dan Ariely, a behavioral psychologist at Duke University who had written 3 New York Times bestsellers on the subject. In one experiment, he scanned the brains of liars and showed how the brain offers less and less resistance to lying the more a person fibs, documenting the neurological feedback loop that turns a truthful person into a pathological liar. I had to know more, so I scheduled a meeting with him as soon as possible, a date which turned out to be in October. Shortly after I sent that email, the behavioral science world exploded.
This is Dan Ariely. You may recognize him, but there is a problem.
One of Ariely's studies has been retracted due to evidence of fraud.
There is an extraordinary scandal unfolding in the lucrative world of behavioral science.
This is one of the most egregious cases of data fraud we've ever seen in the world of academia.
A data watchdog outlet called Data Colada accused Ariely and his occasional research partner, Francesca Gino, who is a scientist at Harvard, they're both experts on dishonesty, and they said that their findings were themselves dishonest. Now, I'm not going to go into all the sordid details of what exactly happened, since other journalists have covered it much, much better than me. Instead, I'll just put links down to their work down in the description below. But the heart of the controversy centers around fake data on a concept that has become known as the nudge. The idea of the nudge is that little reminders and changes in contracts and forms can completely change the way people act in the world. It can make them lose weight or save money or spend money, if you will, and even make people more truthful. Here is a small excerpt from a talk that Ariely gave at TEDx a few years ago.
And what this is actually saying that much of these decisions are not residing within us. They're residing by the person who's designing that form. When you walk into the DMV, the person who designed the form will have a huge influence on what you'll end up doing.
Nudge theory became cognitive science gold, with governments and Fortune 500 companies hiring Ariely to help design experiments and better customer interactions. But the people at Data Colada said that something never quite added up. Other researchers tried and failed to duplicate Ariely and Gino's key experiments. Then, 2 separate meta-analyses of various nudge findings came up with diametrically opposed conclusions. One, the first paper, said that nudging worked, but the subsequent study said that first paper was totally wrong, and nudging definitely did not work. It felt like there was a little bit of a debate going on, and then came the real bomb. It turned out that some of the papers that Ariely and Gino had put out had obvious fake data that showed statistically impossible results, if not outright fraud. Data Colada even was able to show how someone using Ariely's username in an Excel spreadsheet's metadata inserted new data that just happened to bolster the results that were making his point. Ariely was making a fortune off this and sort of related data as a consultant. The story is big. NPR and The Atlantic, and most recently The New Yorker, all noted the irony on how these top experts on lying were themselves caught lying. Not only that, but the entire field of behavioral science felt like it was crumbling at its foundations. After all, if the top scientists on lying feel that it's okay to lie in their research, then what is truth? Now, I'm not an expert on lying, but I knew that I had this interview all lined up and I had to at least address this brewing scandal. Ariely was already on my schedule. So when I finally got onto the call, I said that I needed to first know how Ariely defined the concept of truth and how he defined lying. I want to go very, very big here. What is a lie and what is truth?
I would say that the truth is something that somebody full-heartedly believes in, and a lie is something that they are saying differently to achieve some other goal.
Ariely also quickly noted that the failures in his research were real, but that they were mistakes, not deliberate deceptions.
Am I very, very sorry that this has happened? Absolutely. Um, have a lot of things improved in our practices from 2008 until every year we get better? Absolutely. Could this mistake happen again? Not this one, but is there any process that is foolproof? I think the answer is no.
The way Ariely sees it, deceptions need to be intentional. And when people make errors, they should be allowed to learn from their mistakes. This, he says, is the only way that science and business can grow and even innovate.
If you think about from a society's perspective and you say, let's punish bad behavior because we don't want it to repeat, and let's reward good behavior because we want it to repeat, we want to reward good intentions. In the long term, good intentions will yield good outcome. And we want people to innovate.
Now, a lot of me agrees with Ariely's perspective here. The rabble on the internet is quick to cancel anyone who shows the slightest moral failing under the implicit assumption that a single lapse in judgment is more important than an entire lifetime of work and effort. Ariely is, after all, a world-famous expert on cognitive behavior and has made real contributions to the field regardless of the status of any particular paper. I think most of us believe that people should be able to correct course when things go awry. But there's more at stake than the question of Ariely or Gino's guilt or innocence in the fake data allegations. To me, the real issue is what Ariely's definition of lying says about how any of us can trust the information that we read online, that we get from experts, or from anyone who says that their work is grounded in science. For Ariely, intention is everything. To paraphrase him, as long as someone believes that they're doing good in the world and their heart is in the right place, then even if they make errors along the way, the general trend will lead to positive outcomes. I've heard similar takes on this idea in the past. In fact, it's a common refrain for every bad actor that I've ever interviewed. Every organ trafficker who I've spoke with in my book, The Red Market, in one way or another said that they weren't stealing other people's body parts, they were helping people survive fatal illnesses. In my interview with the top mafia boss in Bangalore, Muthappa Rai explained that the murders that he was involved with were a necessary outcome of the city's failing judicial system. Meanwhile, in my book, The Enlightenment Trap, the cult leader, Michael Roach, explained away his sexual liaisons with students as, quote, high spiritual teachings. More recently, Wim Hof seems to have no trouble looking past the deaths of the 18 people who practice his method in water and drowned because, as he says, he is helping millions of people take control of their health. In all of these cases and thousands more, people believe that their intentions make up for bad outcomes. The reason that the road to hell is paved with good intentions is that people are exceptionally excellent and efficient at coming up with rationalizations for how their bad actions actually serve a greater purpose. And this is the problem. Ariely claims that he never had incentive to fake his research results because he already had tenure, so there was nothing for him to gain.
You know, not every time people have an incentive to do something, they do it. But if you think about my incentive, I was at exactly the period where I stopped having any incentives to be dishonest. So all of this is not the case. Now,
I don't completely buy this. In the last 20 years, Ariely has become one of the most prominent behavioral scientists in the world. He claims to have Jeff Bezos on speed dial and consults for what I presume are paid engagements all over the world. That sort of success only comes when you can show flashy results that drive headlines that are different than everyone else's results. And once you have some data that back up your catchy hypothesis, it's human enough to believe that any confounding data that you find is merely an error because your fresh insight is making the world a better place. Not only that, but academics don't get rewarded for doing experiments that fail to show anything new. You either publish or you perish. Later in our interview, Ariely even said as much.
And I'll just say something about research. I think we can do safe research, which will yield boring, reliable results, or we can take risks and sometimes make mistakes. Working with more partners, bigger scale, in distant countries, all kinds of things. What is the cost benefit we're willing to take for this risky behavior? Different people have different answer, but I think society would benefit more if people took more risk, even if if increases mistakes.
At an abstract level, Ariely's reason sounds great. The only way to grow is to push boundaries and occasionally make mistakes. But that only works if mistakes happen in a vacuum. When people's reputations eventually get so large that everyone simply buys their theories and their findings regardless of confounding evidence, the discipline ceases to be science. Even worse, it can turn out that people who raise questions about that reigning theory can end up paying a heavy price. The New Yorker reporter Gideon Lewis Krauss wrote about one such PhD student in his reporting named Zoe Zaney, who questioned the basics of nudge theory. To quote that article, when she expressed her doubts, the advisor snapped at her. "Don't ever say that." Members of Zaney's dissertation committee couldn't understand why this nobody of a student was being so truculent. In the end, two of them refused to sign off on her degree if she did not remove criticisms of Gino's paper from her dissertation. One warned that Zaney should not second-guess a professor of Gino's stature in this way. In an email, the advisor wrote, quote, "Academic research is like a conversation at a cocktail party. You are storming in and shouting, 'You suck.'" It wasn't long after her disastrous dissertation defense that Zaney had to leave the field entirely. And this is the real problem. When academic reputations become so powerful that theories trump data, the entire scientific process is meaningless. There is no reason to trust experts when experts have an incentive to maintain the results that advance only their career. And once the lie really gets going, Ariely's own research on the brains of pathological liars that I wanted to interview him about in the first place show that the liars lose any sense of guilt along the way. In other words, they start to feel that their intentions are more important than the actual truth of their own claims. This leads me full circle back to the very reason that I wanted to interview Ariely in the first place, before I even knew a thing about the scandal. If anything, the scandal only highlights how this is a society-level problem of failing trust. According to Ariely, conspiracy theories and misbelief require two components.
The first component is believing something that is either not true or not held by most people, most professionals, and so on. But the second part for me is that it creates a core belief in the person.
Misbelief isn't only a mistake or a gap in knowledge. When they get big enough, conspiracy theories alter a person's entire identity.
That people not only believe something, but it colors their worldview in everything that they observe.
Ariely argues that this total personality change around a core misbelief begins when things just start to go wrong in a person's life. When someone's feeling stressed out, they are more prone to look for exotic explanations of their own misfortune.
People don't have an urge to adopt conspiracy theory when they win the lottery, right? It's not when good things happen. It's when or when they feel extra loved. It's when bad things are happening.
Conspiracy theories give a person a semblance of power over the uncertainty of the world because their exotic explanation is something that no one else can, well, fully grasp. Once they're divorced from ground reality, the beliefs can morph into idiosyncratic formations that are as unique as a person's own mental gymnastics. And if I'm going to be honest, Ariely's defense against the allegations that are against him sound a lot like the conspiracy theories that he just wrote a whole book about. In our call, he started to tell me how reporters from multiple different sources were spinning the story against him. It was a conspiracy, which to me, his interviewer, I was in a spot where I supposedly had to choose. Would I support the person I was talking to who really did seem like a nice guy? Or do I trust the data that other experts had laid out that there was a real problem with his work? According to Data Colada, The New Yorker, The Atlantic, NPR, academics wanted nudge theory to be true so badly that when the data didn't go their way, they modified the statistics to make it hew closer to what they wanted to believe. The scientists had good intentions. It was their belief that eventually new data would come up that would prove that they were right all along. This is also why Zozani's advisors asked her to ignore her own hunches about the weakness of nudge theory and toe their line. And it's why Zany eventually had to leave academia. When I pushed Ariely on some of these points that other journalists had brought up, he was visibly upset. The study that, as I understand it, right, that where this false data appeared was a grounding part of your career, right? It's the nudge data.
No. That's now you're listening to
I'm
reporters.
reading the New Yorker. I'm reading the New Yorker.
Yeah. We can talk about. I don't look. I don't want like. Reporters have their own objective.
To some degree, he's right that I don't personally have all of the information of what happened in his laboratory when he was all alone, how the fake data sets ended up in the foundations of the papers that he and Francesca Gino wrote together. It could all just be a misunderstanding. What I can say is that Ariely's own theory on misbelief defines the truth as something that contradicts what the vast majority of experts in the media and academia believe. Blaming reporters from NPR's Planet Money, from The Atlantic, from The New York Times, from The New Yorker, from all over YouTube for making things up so that they can ruin his career, so that they can tell a better story, sounds like the exact sorts of conspiratorial thinking that he writes about. And this is the conundrum that is so much more important than Ariely's specific case. How do any of us make up our minds about who we can trust? Well, what do you think is true? Is Ariely right that he's the target of a cabal of journalists and self-promoting academics who seek to elevate their own careers by tearing him down? Or does the data they uncovered stand for itself? Is there a middle ground between these two positions? Does any of this matter at all when the very event of this happening undermines trust in scientific results around human psychology? All I know for sure is that everyone in the story believes that they are acting out of the best possible intentions. I wish I could give you something more solid than that. So, in the spirit of full transparency, I'm going to put a link down to the full interview that I had with Ariely down in the description. We went over a lot of ground that I couldn't cover here, and I really think that it's worth listening to if you want to make up your own mind yourself. Not because Ariely's own guilt or innocence changes anything, but as an exercise in deciding how we come to believe in what we consider to be the truth. We spent a little over an hour talking about his research, the allegations against him, and what the future of his career might look like now that he's come under so much scrutiny. Go and check it out and let me know what you think the truth of the matter really is down in the comments. I'll probably also post it on my podcast, Scott Carney Investigates, which is on Spotify, and you can find it over there. Thank you so much for watching this video and being a part of this channel. Help me discover the truth. I really want to know what you think. Thanks so much.